Thank you for joining us today on Earthfile. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. The threat of nuclear war and climate change were among factors likely to push the arms of the symbolic Doomsday Clock closer to doom. Created by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists as an indicator of the world's susceptibility to apocalypse, the Doomsday Clock has been around for a number of decades. It emerged at the beginning of the Cold War to give a sense of the urgency to achieve nuclear disarmament and to climb out of the abyss that we were facing in the early 1950s. Today, scientists and other experts in nuclear technology and climate science say it has taken on climate change and emerging disruptive technology to give a sense of the risk, the catastrophic risk that we face as a planet largely through our deliberate activities. We'll talk about what this means and the way forward.
We moved the clock forward the closest it has ever been to midnight. It is now 90 seconds to midnight.
The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists revealed the new time of its Doomsday Clock on the 21st of January, showing that Earth is closer to extinction than ever. The time moved ahead 10 seconds after about 3 years of sitting at 100 seconds. The clock's hands are moved closer to or further away from midnight based on scientists' readings of existential threats at a particular time. The clock had been set to 100 seconds to midnight since 2020, which was already the closest it had ever come to midnight.
Nuclear risks increased significantly last year, due largely to Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. Putin has repeatedly raised the specter of nuclear use. In launching the invasion, he warned that whoever tries to hinder us should know that Russia's response will be immediate and will lead to consequences you have never faced in your history. A few days later, he ordered Russia's nuclear forces to special combat duty. In announcing the annexation of Ukrainian territories in September, Putin declared that he would defend them with all weapon systems available to us. This is not a bluff. And in case anyone missed the reference to nuclear weapons, he mentioned that Hiroshima and Nagasaki had set a precedent.
The board said the war in Ukraine had also heightened the risk that biological weapons could be deployed if the conflict continued. The team says natural gas prices, pushed to new heights by the war, had also spurred companies to develop sources of natural gas outside of Russia and turned power plants to coal as an alternative power source.
I think for me, the underlying message here is that if we maintain an addiction to competition and to conflict as a way of managing our social interactions and our interactions with the ecosystems, we will perish because the threats, global catastrophic risks that we face are getting bigger every year as these developments come to pass.
The clock was created in 1947 by a group of atomic scientists, including Albert Einstein, who had worked on the Manhattan Project to develop the world's first nuclear weapons during the World War II. The bulletin was founded by scientists who helped develop the United States' first atomic weapons. Its Science and Security Board decides on the clock's hands in consultation with its board of sponsors. More than 75 years ago, it began ticking at 7 minutes to midnight. At 17 minutes to midnight, the clock was furthest from doomsday in 1991, as the Cold War ended and the United States and Soviet Union signed a treaty that substantially reduced both countries' nuclear weapons arsenals. Paul Ingram, Senior Research Associate at the Center of the Study of Existential Risk at the University of Cambridge, who is not among the scientists to decide the position of the clock, said if nuclear war were to break out, billions of people would die due to the follow-on effect on climate change that could cause mass starvation and other disasters.
If I were in charge of it, yes, I would be taking it closer. We've seen the emergence of a new war, invasion of Ukraine, the warnings of nuclear weapons use We've seen the failure of COP27 to come up with any serious attempts to curb the activities of the fossil fuel industry. And we've seen the emergence of new artificial intelligence capabilities, which we still haven't really grasped the full extent of the risks that has for humanity. What keeps me awake at night is neither climate change nor nuclear weapons in and of themselves. It's the combination of all these threats emerging together and impacting upon one another. So the risk of nuclear war rises as climate change kicks in because states compete for dwindling resources, and the capacity of the planet to maintain our standard of living is reducing as ecosystems collapse.
Delhi, the planet is showing signs of the danger we face, from Europe to the Americas, Asia to Africa. The pink hue of Western Senegal's Lac Rosé once drew thousands of tourists from all over the world to its salt-laden shores. But today, a new wide channel spews brownish-green water into the lake, whose shore is dotted with dead fish. Pape Siraba and a dozen other salt farmers bag up what may well be their last harvest after extreme floods contaminated the lake and turned its famous waters green, threatening thousands who depend on it for their livelihoods.
Since the water channel was dug, we have lost a lot of money that we don't even think we can recover. This is the first time we've seen so much water come in here. We have witnessed many rainy seasons, but what is happening this year is unprecedented.
Officially known as Retba, the lake's high salinity and rare microbiome long fostered an algae that turn it pinkish in the right season, making it one of the world's most visited attractions and under consideration as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Everything changed last September when torrential rains hit the nearby capital Dakar and swept floodwaters towards the lake, tearing a wide channel in its bank. The deluge washed away countless carefully tended salt mounds and submerged tourist businesses on the shoreline.
When we used to swim, when the salinity level was high, we used to float on the surface. And swimming had therapeutic virtues because it cured diseases. But what amazed people was to know how a person can float on the surface of a pink water. That's what excited people. Nowadays, we can't see that anymore.
Qui ont une coloration rose et tu auras de belles images. C'est ce qui excitait les gens à venir découvrir le lac. Actuellement, on n'en a plus.
The flooding destroyed 7,000 tons of salt worth around $1.7 million, according to the Salt Extractors Association.
Mais ces quantités d'eau ont plusieurs origines. Il y a une origine naturelle, c'est lié à des eaux.
These quantities of water have several origins. A natural origin with rainwater. But there's also this aspect which pushes some to think that the Pink Lake can be a retention basin. It is to sign the death warrant of the Pink Lake. Because I remind you, the elements which live there and which are responsible for the pink color are linked to this environment, which is extreme. If the environment is diluted, these elements will disappear. Secondly, the salt, which is exploited in the Pink Lake, is linked to the saturation of this lake. If the lake is diluted, the salt water will disappear. Even during this rainy season, you see that all the salt dunes have been dissolved.
Ba now fears the changed composition of the lake will make further harvest impossible. The salt farmers are just some of the 3,000 people who live off the lake. Boatmen and souvenir sellers also fear for the future if the waters remain the current unremarkable hue. It's peak tourist season in Senegal, but he and others have been waiting in vain beside their pink flat-bottomed boats. The ongoing influx of sediment-heavy water would permanently change the lake's unusual ecosystem.
Do you see the orange banner? That was my store. All these stores that you see have been flooded by water.
The flood waters are slowly receding around the souvenir and crafts market at the lake, but vendors are still worried.
Even if this water decreases, it will not decrease 100%. The water is gradually receding. The little you see here, we did it ourselves. We can't do like the street vendors. For the moment, we really don't have hope that this place will be like it was before.
Meanwhile, in Tunisia, 3 years of drought have dried up reservoirs threatening harvests that are critical to the North African country's battered economy and pushing the government to raise tap water prices for homes and businesses. Since September, only 110 million cubic meters of rain fell in Tunisia, about a fifth of the normal rate, and officials in the Farmers' Union and the main trade union warn that grain crops will suffer, adding to existing problems of food supply.
We are facing a lack of rain, which has not been recorded since the year 1950. We didn't see any rain during the month of December, which has great effects, because as we know, rainfall in our country records high levels in December and in autumn. However, it has been a dry season up until the month of January. We can just ask God for rain because the situation is catastrophic regarding water resources.
As climate change has accelerated, bringing blistering heat across the Mediterranean region in recent summers, winter rains have repeatedly diminished in North Africa, causing problems for agriculture from Morocco to Tunisia.
The situation that we're in is due to climate change. It has cast a shadow over our country and the countries of the Mediterranean, and from which most countries suffer. Climate change is happening fast and has taken everyone by surprise. The state, farmers, and all those involved in the agricultural sector. Because the situation is deteriorating and we're not suffering from water scarcity. We're recording in Tunisia today numbers that we have not seen since our independence: 655 million cubic meters in 37 dams.
At the Sidi El Barak Dam in Nafza, 140 kilometers west of the capital, Tunis, the dry ground behind the dam is cracked, with trees slowly dying, the result of another failure of rainfall. Empty dams across the fertile northern hills and eastern plains are alarming farmers who produce crops of olives and wheat that once made Tunisia the breadbasket to the ancient world. Olive oil is still the country's most important export. In the rural region of Siliana, farmer Hatem Nafrudi was filling his tanker truck with water from a depleted dam, confusion and gloom on his face.
We're not used to dealing with the problems which we have been facing this winter season. And during the last one, the idea of watering trees in the winter, this was an impossible thing to happen. But now we're in January, and I've watered my plants for the fourth time because the autumn season was dry, and the olive trees did not produce anything. I'm trying to water the trees as much as I can, the olives and almonds, but everything is dry.
Tunisia already has food supply problems thanks to high global prices and the government's own financial difficulties, which have reduced its capacity to buy imported food and subsidize farms at home.
In 1992, now I'm 30 years old, and I've never witnessed anything like this yet. If I wanted to express my feelings, I would cry because of the lack of rain, as my livelihood depends on it.
The drought has pushed up further prices, contributing to a crisis for Tunisia's dairy industry as farmers sell off herds they can no longer afford to keep, leaving supermarket shelves empty of milk and butter. As the country tries to prioritize grain staples and export crops, it has urged farmers to stop irrigating vegetable fields with water from dams. In a further urgent measure, authorities have also, in some cases, limited supply to farms to make sure there will be enough drinking water for homes and businesses. as it wrestles with both its own fiscal problems and the need to reduce any excessive consumption. The government has raised water prices on a sliding scale, with bigger increases for the heaviest users and wealthiest economic sectors. All those measures have pushed up vegetable prices, adding to inflation of over 10% that is driving public anger at the current president and the government he appointed after seizing most powers in 2021.
It is time to declare a state of water emergency, because all indications show that if we remain silent, then thousands of families will be thirsty and deprived of drinking water. So we must declare a water emergency.
Economy Minister Samir Said said last week that Tunisia is preparing studies for new dams and seawater desalination plants for development between 2023 and 2025. Officials are also contemplating more extensive rationing. The number of reported disease outbreaks and climate-related health emergencies in the Greater Horn of Africa have reached their highest ever level this century, deepening a health crisis in a region where 47 million people are already facing acute hunger. Most parts of the region are battling the worst drought in at least 40 years, with an unprecedented fifth rainy season failure now anticipated, while other parts face flooding and conflict. Many people have completely lost their livelihoods and coping capacities and are relying heavily on assistance to meet basic needs.
We have been in a drought situation for 3 years. We lost all our livestock. We have starved. We could not get transport. We carried these children on our heads. And those able to walk, they walked. Just survive on what people give us. We just eat what we have. We cannot buy meat or milk. And these are the only things we can eat.
Baidoa district in the southwest state of Somalia is one of the areas most affected by the current drought, hosting the second largest population of internally displaced persons after the capital city, Mogadishu.
Baidoa is one of the 2 districts in the states that have been on high alert for likelihood of sliding into full famine because of the protracted conflict. We have mass displacement of population, and when we talk about this recurrent drought, what the world is not able to comprehend is that we deal with the same caseload of people every year. So successively, they are losing their productive assets, losing their livelihoods, and becoming poorer and poorer with every drought event.
Through its network of local rapid response teams and community health workers, World Health Organization is providing an integrated package of health and nutrition services for the most vulnerable people in Baidoa. This includes vaccination against infectious diseases for children under 5, such as polio, measles, and cholera, screening children for malnutrition and referring the severe cases to stabilization centers. The teams also focus on raising health awareness among vulnerable and displaced populations.
We provide vaccines, ORS, zinc, albendazole, and vitamin A. People are getting some food, but not enough to meet their needs.
Due to the persistent drought, many people lost their livelihoods and were left in no choice but to leave their homes in a search of humanitarian assistance, often walking for days to reach the camps.
Most of the people in these IDP camps are those who have been displaced from their villages, and they are in great need of vaccinations. There was a recurrent measles outbreak in Baidoa, and people were happy to receive the vaccines.
Rapid response teams and community health workers come from the communities they serve and are key to deliver services where insecurity and drought prevent people from accessing health care.
There is acute malnutrition, which in this case of drought is caused by household food insecurity. And there is chronic malnutrition, which is also linked to food insecurity and poverty. So children who are exposed to malnutrition have less ability to fight off infections, and for chronic malnutrition, they also miss their development milestone. In our view, it is part of the bigger problem of climate change and global warming. And unfortunately for us in this part of the world, we seem to be paying the biggest price in terms of human casualties, in terms of our ability to fight hunger and poverty. And this way, then we are at risk of missing the achievement of sustainable development goals by the year 2030.
Meanwhile, over in Europe, the continent has experienced its second warmest year on record in 2022, European Union scientists said on the 10th of January. As climate change unleashed record-breaking weather extremes that slashed crop yields, dried up rivers, and led to thousands of deaths. The European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service said 2022 was also the world's fifth warmest year by a small margin.
So our Copernicus data shows that globally it was the fifth warmest year on record, but what's really to note here, I think, is that the last 8 years were all the warmest on record. So, and they were all also more than 1 degree above what we call the pre-industrial level for temperatures. And we would look at Europe. Europe was the second warmest on record, and it was especially summer that was the warmest on record by quite a large margin, and the previous warmest summer we saw just 1 year ago, so in 2021.
The Copernicus Climate Change Service records date back to 1950, but other longer data sets confirm 2022 was the world's fifth warmest year since at least 1850. The last 8 years were the world's 8th hottest on record. Last summer was Europe's hottest on record, smashing temperature records in countries including Italy, Spain, and Croatia.
The summer for Europe was the warmest on record, so there's kind of a seasonal record broken. Then there were a number of heat waves where, for instance, the temperature of 40 degrees was reached for the first time ever in the United Kingdom. So that's a country level record. And then if we look at, for instance, southwestern Europe, which was especially hit by all these different heat waves that we saw from May through all the summer months, and actually also during October, especially May and July were very warm for that region.
Severe heat waves caused more than 20,000 excess deaths in countries including France, Germany, Spain, and Britain. Combined with a dearth of rain, the heat triggered a widespread drought that initial analysis ranked as Europe's worst in 500 years. Low water levels delayed shipping along Germany's Rhine, while the lack of rain hit hydropower generation and slashed maize and soybean crop yields.
We also saw during the summer months very little rainfall, clear skies, which in themselves also reinforced the warm temperatures. So we also saw a large region of southern and central Europe, which was affected by drought throughout, or especially at the end of summer. Well, so it's always difficult to say just based on one event whether climate change is happening faster or slower than expected. For this, you really need to look at kind of a longer term perspective and put 1 year after the next and kind of look at the longer term perspective. But I think the heat wave in May was quite interesting because there was really high temperatures in southwestern Europe kind of relatively early for the year.
Other parts of the world faced a year of climate devastation as well, as global warming continued to hit the world's poor and vulnerable population hardest. Flooding in Pakistan killed at least 1,700 people. In Nigeria, about 600 people, while droughts decimated livestock populations in Somalia.
So in the Paris Agreement, there's the aim to keep global temperatures to 2 degrees above pre-industrial, but also really concerted efforts to keep it to just 1.5 degrees above that pre-industrial level. And we see that the last 8 years have been more than 1 degree warmer than the pre-industrial, so we can probably say we're around 1 degree or a little bit more above that level. And with ever increasing greenhouse gases, this will not change. So we will carry on having warmer and warmer global temperatures, and we will slowly but surely walk kind of towards these targets. And in order to be able to achieve the goals, so to limit the temperature to any of these targets, we need to make sure that greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere stagnate, and this can only be achieved by reducing greenhouse gas emissions from human activities.
The climate crisis remains a major threat, with the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists noting that while carbon dioxide emissions fell in 2020 because of coronavirus lockdowns around the world, they rebounded to record highs in 2021 and increased again in 2022. But they said there are reasons to be hopeful. With innovation around renewable energy and strong engagement from younger generations who have been passionately pushing for more climate action.
That's Earthfile for the week. Thank you for watching. Be sure to check this episode and other episodes of the program on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/channelsweb. From me, Ayola Kasim, and the Earthfile crew here in Lagos, it's bye for now.